Okay, picture this. Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh, 1836. Some boys are out, hunting rabbits.
Right.
And instead they dig up something. Well, something pretty unsettling. 17 tiny coffins.
Wow.
Each with a little wooden figure inside. And, well, everyone immediately thought of Burke and Hare.
The murderers, yeah. Their crimes are still pretty fresh in people's minds then.
Exactly. So these things instantly got nicknamed the Burke and Hare murder dolls.
But that name, catchy as it is, kind of papers over the real mystery here.
How so?
Well, these Lilliputian coffins, as they were also called back then, nobody actually knows who made them or why. The real story is still a complete puzzle.
Right. So that's our mission for this deep dive, isn't it? We're looking at an article, The Mystery of the Burke and Hare Murder Dolls, to sort of unpack the facts, the theories, everything we know, and maybe what we don't.
Precisely. We want to explore what was found, what the dolls look like, the timing, that Burke and Hare connection, or maybe the lack of one, and all the different ideas people have come up with over the years.
Okay, let's start with the discovery itself. You mentioned boys hunting rabbits. Where exactly was this?
It was near Arthur's Seat, that big hill overlooking Edinburgh. The one that's about 820 feet high.
Oh, yeah, iconic spot.
So these three boys were scrambling around near the base, probably poking into crevices looking for rabbit holes.
And they found something else entirely.
They did. They found this small niche, sort of hidden away. Apparently it was covered with pieces of slate, almost like someone had deliberately blocked it off.
Hidden, okay. And inside, 17 of these things.
17 miniature coffins, yes. But here's the sad part. The boys, well, they were just kids. They didn't immediately get what they'd found.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they apparently broke open and, well, destroyed about half of them before anyone realized their significance.
Oh, that's such a shame. So how many survived?
8. 8 unopened coffins were eventually recovered from that hillside. We'll never know exactly what was in the other 9.
Still, 8 is something. What were they like? The Scotsman newspaper reported on them, right?
They did. They described the coffins as being tiny, only 3 to 4 inches long.
Wow, that's small.
Yeah. And apparently carved from just one piece of Scots pine, except for the lid, which was nailed down separately.
Okay.
But the really amazing part was the detail. They had these little tin ornaments, like tiny decorations, actually embedded into the wood on the lids and sides.
Tin ornaments on something that small.
They're
That's intricate.
It really is. Think about the time and effort involved. And inside, the newspaper said the wooden figures had pretty well-executed faces.
So not just crude carvings?
Apparently not. And they were dressed in little cotton clothes, laid out with what the report called a mimic representation of all the funereal trappings.
Like tiny funerals.
Exactly. A deliberate imitation of a proper burial, just on this incredibly small scale. It's kind of poignant, really, especially when you think about how bodies, particularly the poor or murdered, were often treated back then. Maybe this was someone's way of giving them some dignity. Symbolically, at least.
That's a fascinating thought. Did all the coffins look the same?
Mostly. But there were slight differences in how they were made. Little inconsistencies. It's led some people to think maybe, just maybe, 2 different people worked on them.
Interesting. And the dolls themselves? The figures inside?
Well, the ones they could see, they all look like male figures.
All male. Okay.
Yeah. The open eyes and, intriguingly, black feet. The assumption is that the black feet were meant to be boots.
Boots, right.
And there was one really odd detail. One of the dolls actually had his arms removed.
Removed. Why?
Presumably just to make it fit inside his coffin.
Huh. So maybe they weren't made specifically as corpses.
That's one theory, yeah. That maybe they were existing figures, perhaps toys, that were then adapted, dressed up, and put in the coffins.
Repurposed. Adds another layer, doesn't it? Why go to that trouble?
Exactly. What was the motivation behind transforming them like that?
Okay, let's talk about Burke and Hare. Their shadow really hangs over this whole thing.
Right.
Remind us when their murders happened.
That was in the late 1820s, so just a few years before these dolls turned up in 36.
And they were notorious in Edinburgh.
Oh, absolutely. William Burke and William Hare, 2 Irish immigrants, realized there was a shortage of bodies for anatomy schools, like Dr. Knox's at Edinburgh University.
Because the only legal supply was, what, executed criminals?
Pretty much, yeah. And there weren't enough executions to meet the demand for dissection. So Burke and Hare decided to create their own supply.
By murdering people. Grim.
Very grim. They targeted vulnerable people, lodgers, travelers, and they sold the bodies to Dr. Knox.
How many victims were there in total?
The generally accepted number is 17 murders. Plus, there was one man who died of natural causes in Hare's lodging house, and they sold his body first. That sort of gave them the idea, apparently.
It's like 17. Okay, there's the number again.
Exactly. 17 murders in the late 1820s, 17 dolls found in 1836. You can see why people immediately made the connection. The timing was just too coincidental for many.
It does seem like a perfect fit, almost too perfect. But you mentioned earlier there are problems with this theory.
There's one major problem,
Yeah.
the really significant one.
Which is?
The victims. We know that at least 12 of Burke and Hare's victims were women.
Right.
But every single figure found in those coffins was male. Clearly male.
Yeah.
Okay, that is a big discrepancy. 12 women versus 0 female dolls.
It makes a direct one-to-one representation seem very unlikely, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Unless there was some bizarre reason to represent women as men, which, well, it seems a stretch.
It definitely throws a wrench into the simple murder dolls idea. So, if they aren't straightforward representations of the victims, what else could they be? What are the other theories?
Well, one idea is the guilt theory.
Guilt. Whose guilt?
Maybe someone involved, perhaps Burke or Hare themselves before Burke was caught, or maybe even someone connected like Dr. Knox or their wives or Burke's brother. Someone felt remorse.
Remorse for the victims not getting proper burials.
Exactly. These victims were just dissected, no funeral, no respect. Maybe creating these miniature burials was a symbolic act, a private way to atone or acknowledge the wrong.
A kind of symbolic restitution. I could see that. What else?
Then there's the slightly more macabre souvenir theory.
Souvenirs. You mean the killer kept them as trophies?
That's the unsettling idea, that maybe one of them made these little effigies as morbid keepsakes and then hid them later.
Okay, that's creepy. But the timeline, if there were 17 and Burke was arrested after the 17th murder, could he have made the last one?
That's a sticking point, yeah. It's tight. Though the source we looked at does mention the possibility, however remote, of an unconfirmed additional victim that might square the numbers.
Always possibilities, I suppose. Keeps the Burke and Hare link alive, even if it's shaky.
It does. The article also mentions some more out there ideas briefly, like lost sailors or Celtic magic, even voodoo. But there's really no solid evidence connecting those to this specific find.
Right, pure speculation mostly. But there's another, more historical theory, isn't there? The one by Jeff Nisbet.
Ah, yes, Nisbet's are their Sikh coffins theory. He argues they have nothing to do with Burke and Hare at all.
Nothing. So what does he think they are?
He links them to the Radical War of 1820.
The Radical War. Tell me more about that.
It was a populist uprising, basically, a period of social unrest and calls for reform in Scotland. Nisbet suggests these coffins were made to honor the radicals involved, maybe those executed or imprisoned.
So a political memorial hidden away.
That's his take.
Huh?
A secret tribute to a forgotten cause. He even suggested they might have been placed there over time, maybe even rediscovered and added to later to sort of keep the radical spirit alive.
Placed over time. That connects back to how they were found, doesn't it? Didn't you say they were in layers?
Yes, that's a key point. They were found in 3 distinct levels within that little niche.
Okay.
The bottom layer had 8 coffins, and they showed the most decay. The middle layer also had 8 in slightly better condition. And then there was just one coffin right on top, which looked the newest.
So that layering suggests they weren't all put there at once.
That's the inference many draw, yes.
Oh.
It points towards sequential placement over some period.
Makes sense.
But there's a counter-argument, too. Just that the different levels of decay could simply be down to how much exposure each layer got to damp or weathering, even within the niche. Maybe the bottom ones just got wetter.
Right, environmental factors. So even the physical evidence isn't totally clear-cut.
Not entirely. It highlights how interpretation plays a big role here.
Now, despite all these questions, these dolls are generally accepted as genuine artifacts from the period, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no serious suggestion they're fakes or later creations. They have a documented history, even if parts are fuzzy.
Like what happened to the other night, and we don't have anything from the boys themselves.
No, sadly no first-hand testimony from the boys who found them has survived. And yes, the fate of the other 9 dolls is just unknown. It is odd, if they realize the significance later, why no one seems to have gone back to look for the rest.
Another little mystery within the mystery. But the 8 that survived, they have a known history.
They do. They went from the boys to their schoolmaster, then to an archaeological society. After that, a jeweler acquired them and actually displayed them in his private museum for a while.
A private museum, wow.
Yeah. Then they were sold at auction around 1845. And finally, in 1901, they were donated to what's now the National Museum of Scotland in Edinburgh.
And that's where they are now.
That's where you can see them today, preserved but still baffling.
So they've traveled through time, been passed around, put on display, yet we're still asking the same basic questions.
Pretty much. Who made them? When exactly? And why? What drove someone to create these incredibly detailed, tiny burials and hide them away on Arthur's seat?
Were they linked to Burke and Hare despite the inconsistencies, or do they represent something totally different, like that radical war idea? Or something else we haven't even thought of?
And it's the detail that keeps pulling you back in, isn't it?
Definitely.
The intricate coffins, the little clothes, the funereal setup. It wasn't a casual act. Someone invested serious time and likely serious emotion into this.
It really makes you think, all that effort hidden away. So the final question for you, the listener, I suppose, is what do you think? Considering the care, the secrecy, the potential links, what deep human feeling or maybe forgotten event inspired these little figures? What story are these silent witnesses still holding on to?